Our Big 12 Media Day coverage continues, presented by Circa. I'm Anthony Totri, joined by Shehan Jeyarajah of CBS Sports. Last time we spoke, it was Arizona State, Arizona, Utah, Colorado were still Pac-12 teams. I believe the UCLA and USC situation had just happened. Now here we are. Big 12 Media Day. You've got the four corner schools here, the UCFs, the Cincinnati, they're here as well. The Big 12, what are your early expectations for this conference?
Well, it's going to be incredibly competitive. That's the biggest thing that you have to say about this league is that when you look 1 through 16, these are 16 teams that are investing at a high level, that have good coaches, that expect to win, that expect to make bowl games, that expect to compete for the conference. And I think that that's what's so impressive about this group. There's sort of a unified vision in a lot of ways. And the other thing that I think that you have to like about the league, especially in the wake of Texas and Oklahoma leaving, is that I think that these are a group of schools that are all strivers. They're willing to do what it takes to try to get to that next level. And I think you've gotten that feel just from being around the athletic directors here, the coaches here, the players here. And I think that makes it one of the most upwardly mobile leagues in college football.
Brett Yormark said that he believed that this was the deepest conference in America. Do you agree with that sentiment?
It depends how you define deep, right? Like, I think that when you talk about college football playoff contenders, I mean, obviously the SEC is going to have 5 or 6 or 7, but there's also a bottom class of the SEC that I don't think exists in the Big 12. There will be some teams that maybe win 3 or 4 games this year, certainly. But, I think about a team like BYU that I expect to be improved. They could be better and still win fewer games than they did last year just because of how many good teams there are. So I do think that there is definitely a case of the Big 12 being the deepest conference. But he's also a marketing guy. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, if this conference truly is the deepest or has even that potential, I think there's a lot of discussion about the top teams, right? Kansas State, Kansas, Utah, Arizona. Is there a team that you believe can really be a surprise in this Big 12 conference?
Well, I feel like I've talked about this team so much that I don't know if it's a surprise anymore, but Iowa State, I think, is the most undervalued team in the Big 12 this year. They rank number 1 in returning production nationally. After starting 1 and 2 in non-conference play last year, they finished 6 and 3 in conference play. In November, they had a chance to make it to the Big 12 title game, and I think they have a chance to be even better this year. They're the best returning defense in the Big 12. They have a quarterback in Rocco Becht who has some weapons like Jalen Noel, and I think the swing piece of this team is going to be their running game, and whether Abu Sama can kind of take that step to being a down-to-down type back. So they're a team that I think is very undervalued heading into 2024. Another one that I'd throw out there as well is UCF. It's going to come down to that offensive line unit and whether they're really ready for prime time. But you look at some of the guys that they brought here, KJ Jefferson, RJ Harvey, Kobe Hudson. They've got one of the best collections of skill position talent in the country. And again, we'll kind of have to wait and see whether their offensive line is up to the moment. But if it is, the sky's the limit for them.
Absolutely. Again, we cover Arizona State, so I think when it comes to the quote-unquote disrespect, right, finishing or voted to finish 16th in the Big 12 preseason media poll, I'm curious what you think of that team, and then, of course, the coach in Kenny Dillingham.
Well, I'm a big Kenny Dillingham fan. I think, first of all, it's funny. He's one of the few coaches in college football who's close to my age, which is always a lot of fun. The first younger millennial coach that we kind of see in college football. So certainly I'll be rooting for him. And I think he's got a lot of good ideas about how to run a program. Utilizing the transfer portal, being very vocal about NIL, some of the offensive schemes that they use, I'm a big fan of. I do think that I just wonder about the youth of this roster, right? Like, it's still, I think that I heard it's like the 5th youngest roster in college football heading into 2024. And so, especially in the trenches, are they going to be up to that challenge week in and week out? I'm also curious to see with Sam Levitt coming in as quarterback, like, is he going to be able to add just a little bit of a different dynamic to what they had last season? So I would not be surprised at all if they are able to move up a little bit, but certainly when you project heading into the year, they're the most unproven of the bunch.
I am curious. I'll put you on the spot here.
Yeah.
What is the floor and what is the ceiling for Arizona State in your estimation?
Yeah. I mean, so the floor is low, like just straight up, right? Like, I mean, 2 or 3 wins, like it's there if some things go wrong for them, especially if they have some injuries at the quarterback position. I mean, I think the ceiling, right? Like, you look at some of the running back room that they have, Cam Scatabo, of course, some of the transfers that they added this offseason. It's impressive. Like, this is a really good skill position group. And also, with a guy like Brian Carrington from my neck of the woods in Texas, right? He's been able to bring some of those former Texas commits out that way. And so I do think that there is an upside there if the trenches are able to get going. And, so pushing towards 5-6, towards a bowl game, I think is definitely on the table.
John, last couple questions before we get you out of here. Colorado, obviously, yesterday was a bunch of, 8 schools? Today there were supposed to be 8 schools. It felt like it was just the Deion show today. For you, what do you expect from that team? Obviously, there's a lot of people who think that they can be really good, and then there's a lot of people on the opposite side of the aisle who think that they're a little overrated.
I think they're going to be right on that 5-6 line, right? I would err towards them making a bowl game. I think that just you look at some of the talent that they have, of course, it's as good as anybody in college football on the top end. Of course, so much has been said about that offensive line unit and also just the change schematically on offense to go to more of a pro-style system. It's going to be an adjustment, I think, in some ways. So I do think that this is a team that's going to be competitive every single week. Even during their kind of collapse down the stretch, they were still pretty competitive overall. And I think, again, it's going to be how quickly can they integrate the number of players that they need to integrate into their team. I feel pretty good about it, especially on the defensive line. I feel all right about it at linebacker. It's really the trenches on offense that I want to see that growth happen, and we're going to kind of have to wait and see what happens.
So with all that said, all the teams that we discussed, highs, lows, who are you picking to win this conference here in early July, of course?
To me, the team right now is Utah. I think that with Cameron Rising coming back, tight end Brent Keithy as well, and Dorian Singer coming in at receiver, they just have a chance to be actually pretty dynamic offensively. And you look at them last year, they won 8 games despite the fact that they were basically fielding an Iowa offense a lot of weeks. And so I think that if they're able to be good on offense this year, their defense is kind of a known commodity. They have some questions in the secondary, but nothing crazy. They have the easiest pathway to being a complete team. I look around the rest of the conference at the other contenders, right? You talk about Kansas State. Lots of changes on the offensive line. First-year starting quarterback, losing a player like Ben Sinnott at tight end. That's a lot to lose. You look at the health questions around Jalen Daniels at Kansas. You look around some of the defensive turnover at Arizona, right? So there's lots of contenders who I think are maybe one thing going right away from being a Big 12 title contender, but Utah is the team that I feel most confident is going to be in that group.
Definitely. Sean, thank you for taking the time today. We appreciate it, man.
Thank you for having me.
We all silly like the mayor.